Dude, this is ridiculous, and you already know that it is. Before diving deep into whatever it is we're talking about, based off the title, based off the thumbnail, you know what, this is not really a conversation that is gonna go too far. But I wanted to go out there and talk about the potential trade ideas that could be on the horizon, as well as a conversation made on the JIC show as to where these talks could go. Now, y'all seemed to really like it last time we mentioned a comment made by former Canadian Maxim Lapierre. That was the Trevor Zegras video, and based off of some of the responses, you know, we had our Canucks fan love, some of the old Canadiens fans as well going out there and saying, yeah, Maxim Lapierre was a nice hockey player to have tickled in the brain a little bit there, you know, nice throwback memory, right? But in that last video, we did discuss the idea of Trevor Zegras heading over to Montreal and Maxim Lapierre's very strong opinion as to why it wouldn't be a good move. Now, in today's video, we're going over a different Lapierre segment on JIC, and it comes courtesy to us via the folks over at TVA Sports. Now, they had themselves an article published 2 days ago titled this, "Not the Trade of the Century for the Montreal Canadiens." Essentially, there are some comments made in this post, and we'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and read the article, listen to the video that's included yourself. But with Sean Monahan moving elsewhere, will the Montreal Canadiens' Kent Hughes be tempted to let go of other elements of his team between now and the trade deadline? Monahan was clearly the one who was going to bring in the most. Now, who's next? Will Montreal Canadiens forward Tanner Pearson be next to leave? You then had the folks on JIC, Guillaume Latendresse, as well as Maxim Lapierre, go out there and discuss. But before we go out there and reveal what it was they have to say, this is kind of why this video is pretty ridiculous. Because even without going over their comments, without going the profile, if you're a Canadiens fan who has been watching this team, you kind of already know the answer. What kind of value is there that Tanner Pearson will be able to fetch in the trade market? Probably, and I say this with the most respect in the world for Tanner Pearson, nothing. And I say that truthfully, man. Like, look, I met the guy back in the summer when he was in Richmond doing the Troy Stecher thing, and he was a great dude. Very kind, very nice. He was one of the only players to spend multiple days out in the rain with the fans, taking pictures, signing autographs. Him, Stecher, Gallagher, they were doing their thing. I got a lot of photos with a bunch of these players, but Tanner Pearson was one of the nicer guys. For sure. And I respect his body of work. Stanley Cup champion, that 70s line with Toffoli and Carter, eventual Pittsburgh Penguin, Vancouver Canuck, of course, yours truly, and then a Montreal Canadien. This guy has had a great career path, but his value probably isn't really worth much. Tanner Pearson this season is a 31-year-old left wing, left-handed, signed till the end of this year, making $3.25 million a year. It's kind of miraculous that he got that money in the first place, but hey, Jim Benning's gonna Jim Benning, right? He has 8 points in 31 games played this year, on pace for about 16 over the course of the full season. He hasn't really been much, even with the Vancouver Canucks, as he had 5 points in 14 games last year, spending most of the season on the IR. He had some really weird hand stuff going on, and there were surgeries and recoveries that weren't really all too great. It was an entire, dare I even say, conspiracy with how the Vancouver Canucks were handling the Tanner Pearson injury. But Pearson's last season of total effectiveness, I'd say, was the 2019-20 season, his first year in Vancouver, where in 69 games played, he had 45 points. That was 4 years ago, so he was 27 years old. Nowadays, though, Pearson has more so evolved into a defensively minded two-way winger who has that label of being a defensively minded two-way winger because he plays defensively and doesn't get any offense done. However, when it comes to the Canadiens, it's very obvious they want to go out there and give him some offensive value, as noted by the power play structure immediately after the Monahan trade. You saw Tanner Pearson actually get put in that Monahan spot right when the trade was made, and you had the Habitanco out there and tweet this, "I've never seen a more obvious attempt to try to increase the value of a player before. Tanner Pearson, I wish you the best on whatever team you end up playing for." Is this second unit the worst power play unit of all time? That's going to be a glorious tank. Of course, they're referring to this PP2. Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Josh Anderson, Gignac, Ylonen, and Jakai. Hey, the Montreal Canadiens don't look good on paper, don't they? But going back over onto the article, this is what Guillaume and Maxim go out there and talk about on the JIC show in regards to a Tanner Pearson trade opportunity. If you pass on this, you won't have the moon either, said Guillaume Latendresse on Wednesday during JIC. For me, this is a discussion that leads nowhere. Whether he's there, whether he's not there, whether we go for a draft pick by transaction, it will all depend on what that pick is. Tanner Pearson had a good start to the season. He surprised everyone with a little of his performance at the start of the year with Monahan and Gallagher. We're seeing a guy who, in recent years, was injured, who slowed down a little bit. I don't think any trade would be the trade of a century. This reveals a slightly more serious problem in the eyes of Maxim Lapierre. Yesterday against the Capitals, they are veterans. If you don't look at the score sheet, you have no idea that they played. This is serious. Essentially, what Lapierre is saying is that Tanner Pearson has very little value considering the very little impact he makes on the ice night in and night out. And don't say I didn't warn you, Montreal Canadiens fans. This is exactly why I was over the moon when the Canadiens traded away Casey DeSmith to Vancouver for Tanner Pearson in the first place. The Canucks traded away what was essentially a... Oh, I don't like using this phrase, I really don't, but he was kind of a deadweight winger. Like, when you come to think of the other assets the Canucks had in their systems, they just had no use for a guy like Tanner Pearson, especially since back then they still had Kuzmenko, they still had Beauvillier, they had these guys that were being able to be called up from Abbotsford too. There was just no need for Tanner Pearson, and they needed a backup goalie, so they traded for DeSmith. Now Pearson's in Montreal, he's playing top power play on arguably one of the worst power plays when it comes to the name personnel. Like, sure, the first unit is fine, but the second unit, my goodness, that is a terrible looking power play. The Montreal Canadiens have not really been doing themselves any favors when it comes to building up the roster with names that mean something to non-Montreal Canadiens fans. But of course, you know, that's the tail of the tape. That's how the season is going to go. It's always how the season was going to go. Nobody was expecting otherwise. It's just now, you have yourselves an aging asset who is a forward being placed into a top spot on this Canadian squad. And what? Tanner Pearson now, if you take a look at his last few games here, he's got 0 points in his last 5, 1 point in his last 10, and none of those have been on the power play. So, yeah. You know, as I said, it's unfortunate considering just how good of a dude Tanner Pearson is. I mean, I met him. He's a nice guy. But yeah, the trade value here, I don't know what it is. I think the Montreal Canadiens would be lucky to get something that even resembles a shade of what Casey DeSmith has been for the Vancouver Canucks if you wanted to talk about flipping Tanner Pearson sometime around the trade deadline. What team is even going to go after him? The guy has no points. I kind of agree more so with the philosophy brought up on the JIC show. If you're able to trade him for anything, get that done. Get any sort of value for a guy whom you probably recognize is not going to re-sign. With Sean Monahan, at the very least, you could acknowledge there was good talent there, and that he could bode well with this team and help develop the young guys. Tanner Pearson may have that developmental side to him, but man, does he not have that same scoring touch. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this entire Tanner Pearson Montreal Canadiens trade update and how ridiculous it really is. Do you think Tanner Pearson is going to get traded? Do you think there's going to be a team that bites and gives the Canadiens a draft pick to take on Pearson and give him a role in the playoffs? Or does he kind of go the Phil Kessel route maybe? Not really too important on the ice, but off the ice, very, very important. A leadership type figure that has wisdom to share from his Stanley Cup victories of yesteryear. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Tanner Pearson. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.